did want to ask about Laba. Looks like a step in the right direction for him. Just where things stand, is he a possibility for tomorrow?
Yeah, he's a possibility. He participated full contact today. We'll see how he responds, make decisions from there.
This is the most hockey he's ever played in a year. Obviously, the injury is a little bit more of a freak thing, but how do you think he's handled the physical toll of a full NHL season?
I think he's done a really good job. I think, Lobs has steadily improved his overall game, game to game, week to week, month to month. And I think, without a doubt, one of the biggest challenges, especially coming from college where guys are used to playing a 40-game schedule, 30 to 40-game schedule, to playing 80 to 100 is a significant difference. And just the intensity, the preparation, all of those things that come into play with respect to that. It can be fatiguing in a lot of ways, not just physically. And I think Lobs has done a great job handling.
Do you feel like the third period that you talked about last night is a stepping stone to what you guys want to do going forward?
Yeah, I felt like the whole game we competed extremely hard. I thought the third period was our best, without a doubt. Just the heightened level of intensity, just playing the right way, making good decisions. I think when we play fast, we look fast, and I think that was an indication of that in the third period the other night, or last night, I should say. But I think that third period has been one of our better periods most recently in our last handful of games, and that's the type of game that we aspire to put on the ice more consistently, and that's going to be our challenge moving forward.
The decision to move Susie to play with Morrow, was that about getting him a little more of an experienced partner, or just curious if there was other reason that was the main reason?
We were trying to spread it out.
And as far as the way it looked and wanting to continue it, how do you feel on that?
Well, we'll take it game to game. I think we'll watch and see how the performance is, how we think the pairs are working. But our thought going into it was to spread the young kids through some of our more veteran guys and help us create a little bit of balance.
Where are you at with Perot's game this call-up?
I think Gabe he's starting to figure it out, and that's part of the process. It's experiential learning, and I think young players like Gabe, I think one of his best attributes is his hockey IQ, and so he's trying to figure out how to have success in a league where the players are bigger, stronger, faster, and that's his challenge. And I think certainly his hockey IQ is going to help him there. How do you win puck battles on the wall when you're playing against a guy that's bigger and stronger than you, for example? Or how do you create separation to be able to have the time and the space to make a play? When to hang on to a puck and when to cut your losses and just chip a puck to space. And these are all things that I think experience is the best teacher. And so what we try to watch is experience versus being overwhelmed. And I don't think Gabe is overwhelmed right now. I think he's making an impact on the game. I thought last night he played very well. I thought he was harder on pucks. I thought he looked faster. I thought he hung on to pucks more. He was stiffer on the puck when he was in the puck battles, which is an important aspect of his overall game, because it's going to allow him to make that next play and act on his talent. So I just think the experience that he's getting is going to help him.
Gavin Cup hasn't played much power play just throughout his career, so just how have you assessed the way he's just jumped into this role?
I think he's done an admirable job. I think the sample size is still pretty small, so I don't want to jump to conclusions on it. We're going to try it because right now we think he's the best option we have. And that's quite honestly why he's there. And so, he can shoot the puck. He has pretty good instincts. We had a conversation yesterday about when we discovered Vladdy's offensive game, and I mentioned I think it was goal 7. I was joking, of course. But the point is that his offensive game has really made an impact on this team. and it's evolved here over the course of time. And right now, with Foxy out, we think he's the best option for us up there, and we'll see how it goes.
The other day, Dolan gave an interview on the radio and said one of the reasons he brought you in, or you were brought in, was to change the culture of the team. How do you feel like that's going, whatever, halfway through the first season here, especially with all the injuries and things that you're dealing with?
Yeah, so I think it's been a little bit of a mixed bag. You know, obviously just from a performance standpoint, we'd like to be in a better spot than we are. Having said that, I don't want to sit here and say we haven't made progress in what we're trying to set out to accomplish. And you know, I think one of the things that was brought up by Mr. Dolan in the discussion leading up to me joining this group was, you know, to try to build something sustainable, and I think that's something that I think about a lot, and Chris and I have a lot of conversations around that. And so, you know, there's a process that's taking place right now. You know, for example, one of the things that I thought was important coming into this was to try to build a team that played with more structure without the puck, and so we felt that that's an important element of winning consistently in this league, and so, you know, that's something that is a daily endeavor in trying to improve and get better at that. I feel like we made progress at that. There's a number of things that you know, that we're trying to build from an identity standpoint, and as I said, I just think it's a work in progress, and it takes time.
You laid out, you know, the style that you want to play and the identity. I think we've talked a lot about that so far this season. But are there, when you talk about culture, like, what are some of the other things that means to you, as far as maybe even off the ice, the you know, tone of the locker room, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so we've talked about creating a standard of excellence that we all can be proud of. And what does that mean? You know, how does that manifest itself in real life? And we're asking our players to embrace that, you know, and it's everything from the energy level, the enthusiasm, the passion that we bring, and the intentions that we bring in practice. I've always been a strong believer that we are what we repeatedly do. And if we practice hard, we practice with intensity, we practice with passion, and practice with purpose, that those types of things carry over. But that's a daily endeavor, and that's not easy to do. That's not easy to do in today's NHL. It's a grind, and we're asking for that commitment every day. You know, we're asking for, you know, improvement in our nutrition program. We're asking for improvement in how we train off the ice, and embracing that with enthusiasm. Where, you know, we're trying to utilize science and the technology that we have at our disposal to try to help us make good decisions with respect to workloads on a day-to-day basis. And we consult with our strength and conditioning guys, and we're trying to use science to guide us there. Not that it's the end-all be-all, but it certainly is. It can be very helpful, and we believe in that element of our daily process. So these are all things that, in my mind, are cultural. That you know, some of the stuff that we're asking our group to do can be tedious because it's a daily endeavor. Dynamic warm-ups, recovery modalities after games, on the road, pushing bus times back so that we can provide time for recovery modalities, so that our states of readiness are better the next day if we're, you know, getting ready for the next game, whatever it may be. So, you know, there's a lot that goes into it, but that's just some of it, just as far as how it plays itself out on a, you know, and how it manifests itself, you know, in real life on a day-to-day basis. And then there's other things that I think are something that I think are essential to have success in pro sports. It's hard. It's ultra competitive. Resilience, for example. How do we handle adversity? How do we deal with the ebbs and flows inside of a game when it doesn't go our way? or even from game to game? How do we deal with the noise around our team that you guys provide plenty for us? And I'm joking when I say that, but you understand what I'm saying. I think that's an important element of trying to set a group up and a team up for success. So resilience is something that we talk about a lot, you know, and so these are all things that, I mean, we could talk for days about it, but these are all things that we're trying to implement and that we're asking our players to embrace with enthusiasm.
And that resilience and that ability to handle adversity, as far as your read on the group and their ability to do that so far, well, what would you say?
I think it's a mixed bag. That's what I think. I think, we aspire to be better, and that's what we're trying to do.
How do you measure all of what you just said with wins and losses? Do you separate them or not?
Well, you'd like to believe that they're connected at some point, right? Because you're doing all this stuff because you're trying to gain a competitive advantage in a league that has more parity in it than it's ever been. And you need only to look at the standings and you can see it. And so, we're trying to control everything within our power to gain a competitive advantage. It doesn't guarantee success, but it certainly gives us a better chance, and that's how we feel. And so we are going to try to move the needle every single day and become better versions of ourselves, and this is the process that we're implementing as far as how we're going to try to make that happen. And so, at some point you'd like to believe there's a correlation, and so but we believe in this process. It's a daily endeavor. You can't always control whether the puck is in the net or not. What you can control is what are your intentions, what's your attitude, your level of enthusiasm, and your willingness to try to do the right things, to set yourself up for success, and that's what we're trying to do.
A little bit about the 2026 Olympics and what are some of the challenges that you expect to face?
Well, I think the biggest challenge anytime you participate in these international events that take place in a short window, the biggest challenge that every team faces is to become a team in the true sense of the word. We just lived that experience a year ago with the Four Nations. You have 3 practices and then you play, for example. So in a lot of ways, it's a plug and play tournament in the sense that you don't have a training camp where you can implement a detailed game plan and then you can get reps in practice and work on it and watch game film and apply a process to build a team game. So the biggest challenge is to prioritize what a team concept looks like from a coaching staff standpoint, because I think there's a tendency, and this is just based on my own experience of being part of these types of events, is there's a tendency, and sometimes as coaches, is we want to provide all the information for players, and sometimes in these instances, too much information can get in the way, and you get in the way of instinctive play, and players can become robotic. So there's always that fine line of being prepared, but making sure that you allow for instinctive play. That's why these guys are on these types of teams, because they're elite at what they do. This is the best of the best. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, the biggest challenge is to become a team as quickly as possible, quicker than your opponents.
And this is also the first year that we're having professional hockey players since 2014. So how do you think, does that help Team USA's chances, or?
I think the United States has as good a chance as any country in the world. We believe we can put as good a team on the ice as any country in the world can. I think the Four Nations was a great indication of that. And so we're excited about the group we have. We understand that we got to go out and earn it, that nothing's inevitable. There's a lot of good teams that are going to be in this tournament. There's a lot of countries that have really good hockey players. We believe we're one of them, and we're excited to compete against them.